Good afternoon. Welcome to the September 30th, 2024 Budget Planning Work Session. Speakers Garcia, can you please take the roll?
Yes, Mayor Robert Oxmuck.
Present.
Mayor Pro Tem Luke Wagner.
Here.
Councilmember Jeremy Holt.
Here.
Councilmember Bill Jenkins.
Here.
Councilmember Lisa Lake.
Here.
Okay, looks like everyone is present as we kick off our budget planning process here. We are slated today for 2 hours. I'll let folks know that if we needed to, we could probably go over a little bit, but I have my council chat tonight, so we probably have a 5:30 hard out to make sure we're done. We have an agenda with kind of an approximate time schedule here, so we'll do our best to stick to that. But with that, I will kick it off to Town Manager Adam to get us started.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. We're happy to be here today. You know, some folks don't go for the budget, but I'm a big fan, so I'm excited to talk to you about that today. It's a chance to look forward, and that's what we're doing this year. So we have a few things I'll touch on quickly. I don't want to necessarily beat any dead horses, so we'll get into the meat of it. But what you'll be presented today is a draft budget. Staff has spent a lot of time the last several months, several hours spent on this. With that being said, we're also not married to anything, so this is the opportunity for the council to give it their spin and your input to us so that we're able to have the budget that you all feel good and comfortable with as well. We will touch on the timeline. I'll give you the very quick version now, but we'll recap at the end as well. So this meeting is your first and best chance to give that input as we get into the month of October. We will open it up for the public. So we will have, as we've done in years past, the draft budget is actually already available to the public, so they can see exactly what you all see. We also will give them a forum where they can have input digitally. We found that that works better than folks necessarily coming to this meeting or giving us that in-person feedback. We have received comments in the past, and so we anticipate getting a few again this year. We will incorporate those. Historically, months of November and December have just had one council meeting due to the holidays, so the November meeting would be approval of a first reading and final adoption in December. So that's the rough timeline. So with that, I think Lisa's going to do some talking first, and she's going to, oh, nope, she's not. I'm actually going to talk about a few things to give a summary of some things to kind of help set the tone for the conversations today. And so the first one is, due to some timing, 2025 is going to be a relatively flat year from us from a revenue perspective. Our primary revenue generators are still healthy and growing, albeit slowly. We anticipate some development happening, but a lot of it won't actually hit our books in 2025. Most of that will most likely impact us in 2026. But with that being said, we do still have an increase for demand of services as our residents are growing. And through our capital improvement program, there are infrastructure needs that help set the table for some of these developments. We also are facing the same pressures that others are facing. Inflation has improved, but we do still have it as a factor. And so our operating costs do continue to rise. We also, you'll notice a theme that we're talking a lot about our future in terms of planning, master planning specifically, and looking at the ways that we really want to allocate things, not just for today, but as we go forward. We're also trying to address an increased demand in parks and recreation programming and services, so that's addressed in this budget. But with all that being said, we are still structurally balanced for the next 5 years, assuming we don't have any major changes. And last thing I'll touch on just high level would be our capital. So we are balanced through the 5-year window from a capital perspective, but we have a lot of projects that we consider to be future years, and those future year projects are significant. So the needs we have in the future might mean we have to look at things differently, and that might mean contemplation of debt. It's not necessarily a 4-letter word. I mean, it is, but it also isn't. And so debt wouldn't necessarily be the end of the world. But I think what we do have is a runway to think about how we want to fund those things and what would be the most prudent way to do that. So that's just a very brief overview of the things we'll be talking about. Obviously, we'll go into a much greater detail and obviously have time for you all to have your input. That's just a few high-level thoughts to help set the table of our discussion for today. So with that, I am going to throw it to Lisa this time for real.
My words didn't show up on this slide, so I'll just, oh, they're there, okay. I just first want to thank department heads and staff. We kind of hit them with a double whammy this year as far as a new budget system with ClearGov, and then completely are restructuring the chart of accounts. And so budgeting was a little challenging because what accounts exist in 2024 may not exist in 2025. We're just breaking things out differently. So that's why we're having this work session a couple weeks later than we typically do, so I appreciate your patience with that as well. But the new chart of account structure, I think, is going to be great as far as simplification, consistency, and streamlining. And it'll also provide council, departments, and managers more strategically balanced accounts by function, so we'll be able to better manage those. Next slide. So our current fund structure is made up of 5 funds. We have the general fund, we have the Timnath Landings GID Special Revenue Fund, we have a grants fund, and then we have 2 capital projects fund, the Timnath Development Authority and the Timnath Landing GID Capital. Our new fund structure creates 4 new funds. So we'll have a debt service fund, a Parks and Rec fund, capital projects fund, and capital expansion fund. And then we will discontinue using the grants fund and the Timnath Landing GID capital fund, and that'll just roll into the Timnath Landing GID. And then I think, oh yeah, so there's the stars. Those are the new funds. Okay, and then more of the department structure. This is our current department structure. A lot of items and functions are rolled up into general government right now. And so in our new structure, we break that out by function. So there's more transparency by department and what those costs are. Just keep going to the next slide. Yeah. Okay, thanks. So on the general fund, we create 8 new departments. So we'll have administration, legal, finance, human resource, information technology, facilities, and events. And those were all traditionally rolled up into that general government. And so it's just a better way for managers to manage their budgets and us know what costs are by department. Then I think we can skip through. Yep, go to the next one. Yep. And then we'll, under the new Parks and Rec Fund, we'll have 3 departments. We'll have Parks Administration, which includes parks maintenance, recreation, and reservoir, as those 3 functioned under the Parks and Rec Fund. Okay, Capital Expansion Fund. This will track all of our impact fees by type, and they'll be restricted by those. And then as capital projects occur, we'll transfer out the capital expansion fees to the Capital Improvement Fund. And I think we can skip that one. Okay, any questions on the new chart of accounts? I'll dive into revenue next. So these graphs represent townwide revenue, including the TDA. And when you look at our total revenue, excluding transfers, we have total revenue of $39.7 million. The largest portion of that is sales tax at 36%. Next is property tax, which includes the TIF property tax at 30%. And then we have building use and motor vehicle tax as our other taxes as our next largest source. And then you can see all of the other revenue that makes up our budget. On the next slide, we we have 6 revenue sources that make up 86% of our total revenue. And as you can see, sales tax is the largest portion of that, and then property tax, including the property tax TIF under the TDA. One thing I wanted to just point out by this graph, as Aaron mentioned, the 24 and 2025 are relatively flat in all of those areas. Sales tax, our brick and mortar is seeing somewhat of a flat or relatively slow growth than in years past, while online delivery, service home delivery is increased and offsets that by a little bit. So I'm projecting a 3% overall sales tax increase with no new retail to speak of. Once those get built out and they start producing, then we'll forecast those into our projections. But we want to budget and put forth expenses based on what we can afford today and live within our means. And then as those additional revenue sources come in, then we can talk about moving up CIP projects or everything like that. We really want to make sure, since we're subject to developers and the timing of that, we don't want to produce a staffing plan that we can't afford today, if that makes sense.
Lisa, can I ask a quick question about projected impact fees? I know that we recently redid our impact fee structure. I noticed that we show that flatlining. One concern I have is that when we calculate our impact fees, I think we looked at $20 million on a rec center, and we're talking potentially 3 or 4 times that if we go there. Is there a reasonable opportunity to revisit those impact fees, or what's?
I would say probably not until another 4 or 5 years out, till we hit the next cycle. At that point, we can look at the CIP. I did contemplate that rec center, so I do have $7 million, which was the total that was an impact fee study reserved for construction towards that.
I would also, I believe at council direction, I think we increased it from 20 to 30, and impact fees are going to play a piece. But remember, existing residents will also use it, so we can't anticipate a dollar for dollar. Impact fees can't be, I don't think we can reasonably justify 100% impact fees. But I think 30 million is a very defensible number. When we get much past that, the ice gets a little thinner in terms of how we justify that, because we will anticipate a large percentage of folks using that facility to be existing residents versus the growth.
Thank you.
One more quick question too. So when you say we're basing this off of today, so if there's projects that are already approved, I'm just thinking, you're not, none of those, if it's not built and running right now, we're not considering any of that. So
Right.
Ladera, for example, everything that's been approved there, hotel, any of that is not factored into any of this.
No, it's
Okay.
not. Yep.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah, and the impact fees and the building permit revenue and building use tax are based off of building projections. We get those from the planning department, and so that's why they'll fluctuate. The impact fees does go up. You can see in 2027, 2026, those are larger building years that we anticipate.
With regard to sales tax, Lisa, the current projection is based on 3% growth, and that appears to be pretty conservative, right?
I think it's not conservative for 2025. I think it's probably conservative for 2026 and future years when we have more development, but what I'm seeing, that 3% isn't just taking our total sales tax and doing a 3%. I look at all of our major sales tax remitters, and I forecast out based on where they're at this point this year compared to last year, and there is a trend in slowing in some of our brick and mortar.
Okay, all right, great, thanks.
And then I think Aaron's going to talk about expenditures.
Yeah, and I won't necessarily deep dive unless there's questions about this. I think, to me, the thing that speaks to me most with this donut chart here is we have an aggressive capital outlay at this point in time, and I alluded to that in my introduction. We're having to do a lot of infrastructure projects to set the table for the future growth of Timnath, so that on this screen it's like a bright neonish green, although if you look at that one, it's more, it's toned down a little. But I'm looking at neon over here. That's our capital outlay, so that's our most significant expenditure at this point, followed by our wages. And I don't think that's at all unusual for a municipal government. With capital for the foreseeable future as a growing community, we will continue to have significant capital outlay. The other comment, and maybe it's a little bit of a segue because we'll be talking about personnel next, but the town takes very seriously the personnel, knowing that that's an ongoing expense. And so we try to be very thoughtful about when is the right time to bring in a new position and pull the trigger from that standpoint, not just adding positions for the sake of it. So we'll talk about that more in just a second. You can go ahead. This slide actually speaks to me more because it gives you a glance at today and future years. And so you see our current fiscal year, the 2024, actually has a very robust capital. That's the green bar. And again, you see actually in 25 a very robust year from a capital standpoint. Things do start to come down in those future years. But I almost think the blue and orange bars are more telling, blue being personnel and orange being operating. And I think that speaks to our desire to really be very thoughtful about how we're using the tax revenues that we have. You do see the blue grow, but we also know that the community is growing. And so as we talk about personnel, we'll talk about some of the reasons we do see personnel growing. But especially as you look at the operating line, it's holding very steady. And so we're trying to continue to be very judicious and thoughtful in how we use the revenues that we have.
Can I ask a question on capital before we jump ahead on the slide, Aaron?
Yeah.
If you go back to that bar chart, how much of that 30 million estimate is actually rolling into 2025? I know in past years we've had projects that roll from one year to the next. Is there some of that happening from 24 to 25 for our capital?
So one of the biggest expenditures for capital is the broadband, and I feel like that has actually been on pace. Earl, can you give me a nod? Yes, he is nodding at me. And so that's one of the biggest capital projects we're seeing. So that one's actually holding true. Without getting too far ahead of myself, there always is a little bit of a rollover, and I think that's the nature of things. So I think I'm sure there is some. I don't have that number to the tip of the tongue. We could certainly dig in a little, unless, Lisa, you want to take a stab.
No, I can speak to projects that will likely roll over, but the exact dollar amount we don't know yet. But I think some of the Timnath Parkway will likely roll over, Wild Wing will roll over, and then I think those are our two biggest ones at this point, maybe some of the trails around the reservoir. Okay. But once we know what those numbers are, yeah, we'll do a budget adjustment to reflect that.
You're anticipating that, though, in your green, though,
Yes.
for those rollovers? Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, and Luke, I think that's a great question. What I could tell you is after, several years in municipal government, it's very common to have those roll over. What we really are interested in is not double counting expenditures this year and next year for the same thing. And so we're always trying to stay on top of those projects to make sure that that doesn't happen. So we're going to change gears now and talk a little bit about personnel. I think this is a really effective slide. Lisa put this one together. This is an instance where I think a picture really is worth 1,000 words. We're really seeing growth in personnel from three angles. And so the first of which is the fact that we are in a growing town. And so you see some of those called out. Having a detective with that specialized expertise within our PD and an additional officer. These are not ads. These were anticipated in our budget actually last year. Adding to our bandwidth from the finance department standpoint and HR from payroll. More employees, more checks to cut, more things to do. Additional seasonal workers and an irrigation specialist to help keep our parks looking good. The second group would be, we're specifically trying to grow our recreation department. That comes at the direction of previous councils. Unless you guys are planning a U-turn later this afternoon, I think we're going to continue to invest in those. We're having a very positive response from the community, so I think certainly appropriate. And then last but not least, we're continuing the long-term and ongoing plan of moving away from contracted folks to in-house folks. And so it really represents a three-pronged reason as to why you see some things growing from a personnel standpoint. But I do think it's really important to keep in mind how thoughtful we're being. And department heads can attest to this. We brought in the light to put into their face. We threatened them to take it downtown. But no, we asked them a lot of questions, and we're very serious about adding those positions, making sure that the timing was right, knowing that once you add positions, it's very difficult to claw those back, and it represents a significant and ongoing investment. So with that, we'd like to show you these projections for going forward. The number you see at the top line represents our full-time equivalent, FTE. This would be folks who are in fact full-time, and also a compilation of several folks who are part-time adding up to get to wholes. And then you also see the schedule as we look ahead at some of the positions that will be added in future years. So I'm giving you just a second to look at those.
24 to 25 has the biggest jump at a little over 11. And beyond that, it's fairly conservative.
Yeah, I think that's a fair statement, Bill. We are still continuing to see some of that growth. I think part of that is we're having less contracted folks to bring in-house. The plan has been really a multi-year effort, and we're closer to the end than we are at the beginning. And so I think you're seeing that start to taper off. Just a few other things I do want to touch on from a personnel standpoint. Council's heard about this. We had a presentation from Graves a month and a half or so ago. My weeks fly by, so I don't know about you guys. But from that, the biggest takeaway I think I had from that evening and from the work they did over the course of several weeks and a month or two was a transformation from our old system of each job description having its own unique salary scale, not very practical nor efficient. So we'll be switching from the old system to a new one that bases folks who are in a common wage range to be put together in grades. I think that's much more efficient for our organization. Also, in consultation with Graves, we're anticipating a 4% increase for our non-sworn folks. Graves actually talked to us about most folks doing more along the lines of a 5 or 6%. We thought a 4% was appropriate. So this draft budget anticipates a 4%. I would also quickly touch on benefits. We are seeing an increase through our health insurance of about 13.5%. We are putting forward so we're allowed to do 3 plans at any given time. We are making a change from a plan that we felt is pretty underutilized for a different plan that would actually result in a savings for both the employees and for us as an organization to help mitigate some of that. But in the longer run, and I appreciate Jeremy jumping in on this, but we're looking at maybe more substantial changes in 2025. From a timing standpoint, when we got our renewal notice, we just didn't have enough time to necessarily do a more substantial change, but it's on our radar for sure for 2025. And so we think offering a new third plan is a short-term help, with 2025 being a chance to take a more comprehensive long-term look. But I think it just represents one more way that we as a staff are trying to be prudent and find true win-wins, better for our staff, but better for our community as well. So with that, that's a very, very high-level view of personnel. I think it might be prudent to pause for just a second and let you guys jump in with any questions or comments for us. And I think we're actually still holding to the schedule. You've got 15 minutes before I really try and...
Sure. Maybe let's start down here this time. Lisa, if you have anything.
I don't have any questions specifically related to the personnel, but I appreciate you guys looking out that far, and really, I know it had been a goal of previous councils to bring all those contract employees in-house, and I appreciate you all doing it very strategically and efficiently, so thank you.
My question is, obviously, 24, 25 is the biggest jump. How many of that is contract to in-house?
4 positions, I believe, came
4?
to the previous slide. Yeah. IT, senior engineer, and then the 2 events
Okay. So what would that leave us left? How many more contractors after that?
I think the next one that we're considering is a communications manager in 2026.
So
And
not many.
yeah,
I like to, okay.
that's all that I envision right now. Mhm.
Yeah.
And, oh, never mind. Melissa has a slide up. You can see the green bar represents.
You know, while we're on that, the request is an 11-person jump. It's really a 7-person jump because of the 4 contract. And you don't have to answer this now, but I'm curious if there were one position that we were to not look at funding, you know, what would that look like and what would the impact be? And one thing that came up, I think Councilmember Jankin asked the question about the irrigation specialist and that being budgeted as a full-time position, but I assume irrigation needs kind of fluctuate throughout the year. So I had a question about that need specifically.
I think I'll let Tom speak about the irrigation specifically, and I think if we had one position we would eliminate, I think we'd have to go to department heads and really evaluate. This was 3 or 4 rounds with each department heads, and we did push back 5 or 6 positions into future years than what was presented, and so I can't give you this position is the one.
So yeah, the irrigation specialist. So starting next year, Waypoint was handling the irrigation and landscaping for this building, the police station. Drawing a blank on some of it, but then we're also getting Wild Wing Park. So Nick is our parks operations supervisor, is our irrigation specialist. He's being asked to do more of the supervisory role and less in the field. So bringing on those new facilities, having Wild Wing, also downtown planners is something that we're going to be taking on as well. So we increased those, and then during the winter, we're also taking on all of the plowing of the sidewalks. That's what Waypoint used to do. So the need for a full-time position, yes, it's irrigation specialist, which will be 7 to 9 months. The non-pot system with the reservoirs, not just your normal turn on a system and go. So that's going to need some more attention while we're running that. So I really am pretty, this is a position we've got to have.
If I could, Mayor, I think Tom makes a great point. So while we didn't put it into the green bar, it does represent something that would be offset by savings that is being paid to Waypoint. Also, I mean, we do have folks who tend to have maybe on the surface jobs that are more warm month, spring through fall focused, but we have lots of opportunities to keep folks busy through the winter time. The town is responsible not just for the plowing that you think of when you think of Harmony and our arterials, but we have long stretches of sidewalk and other responsibilities. And so those folks, it's a difficult time to scramble people together on a short period of time. Sometimes you're fighting snow for long periods of time and you need people to spell other people. And so having folks who can help in the winter is always a useful thing.
Maybe Chief can answer this. On the police front, where are we at right now currently in terms of budget positions and staffing? Are we fully utilizing what's budgeted now?
No. We're short a lieutenant. We're short 2 sergeants. Well, 1 sergeant, and then a couple officers.
So I suppose I asked the question, and I am fully supportive of the long-term police staffing plan. I understand we have to have the level that we're at now to do 24/7. I can get all that, but practically, given the delay in police hiring, maybe that police officer position specifically, are we likely to fill that, or is that one that could bump to 26 if we had to? Okay, yeah, and that's a critical position in terms of liability and training and whatnot. So I'm glad you're finding the right person there. Okay, Mayor Pro Tem.
Go ahead.
So I want to touch on that openings as well. So if we've got 11 coming in, are there any other openings in departments besides the police department that we're not filling at this point?
We have one planning vacancy that I think we'll post. I'm not sure before the end of the year.
Okay, so not a lot. So
Not
it's
a
not like we're not adding 2 positions with already 2 open, right?
Right.
Okay. Okay. So first of all, I just want to say thank you. I read through all the justifications, and it's I appreciated the work that staff and put in, and thank you, Lisa and Aaron. You know, my only concern, I guess, looking at personnel is we talk a lot about things of the nature of flattening revenue, flattening till possibly 2026, increased capital expenses. You know, and by no means am I an expert. Do I know if we need an irrigation specialist? I don't know that. That's not something I can ever think that I'll even be able to know whether or not. So I look at this and I want to ask the question. I'm going to look at the other council people is like, you know, is there an opportunity just because of our flattening revenue? Do we come back to the positions and say, you know, and what I'm hearing is everything is justified, right? Everything in here is justified. But if there's, you know, can we, you know, $1 million is a lot, right? $1 million is a lot. So I you know, and that's total compensation with a flattening revenue. So I just personally just feel a little uncomfortable with that, with where we are, especially if one of those things don't come online in future years. So I'm a little uncomfortable with that. I don't know how to do let's prioritize or what this is, because I don't attempt to even know that. So just some general feedback is I don't know if there's something that maybe we can look at and say, can we target 750,000, you know, instead of $1 million, or can we target something else? So I'm asking for your guys' feedback on that. If you're comfortable, maybe I'm the only Grinch in the room, but I just want to throw that out there and kind of get your guys' feedback.
So, yeah, I have some comments just to follow up on that and some other ones. So, Chief, you said 2 sergeants are 2, and it looks like you have 2 candidates for 1 position currently, correct? 2 candidates for 2 sergeants. So they both might qualify. It's questionable. I'd like to have a larger pool. Yeah. So to Luke's point, I'm wondering, the way these positions are in the budget is for the full year, correct? The likelihood of filling 11 positions on January 1st is close to 0. Even if you started recruiting now. So one of the ways that you could address your concerns, Luke, is keep the total number, but maybe phase them in by priority and let the department heads figure out which are the most important positions and when is the best time to fill them, so that, you know, maybe we don't end up with 11 full-time positions come January 1st in the budget, that by the end of the year, you have them all hired. So that might be one way to save a little bit of money and also get us into 2026, where we have higher projected revenues, presumably with more businesses coming online in terms of sales tax, and also perhaps more property tax with continuing new houses coming online. So that's one possibility. The other question I had, so the irrigation specialist, and I did raise it thinking, okay, you're going to do irrigation maybe 6, 8 months. 9 months seems pretty unlikely. I usually turn mine off in mid-October and turn it back on May. But that person would also be doing presumably the sidewalk snow plowing during the winter time. Is that
Yeah.
the plan, Tom? Yeah,
There's plenty of work for year-round, and we were,
okay,
when we looked at this position, this was one of those long-term positions that
Yep.
was targeted, especially with Wild Wing Park.
yeah, no, I mean, the irrigation specialist makes a lot of sense. I was just looking for ways to, could we shave a little bit of the personnel expenses and,
Yeah, we saved a little bit of money because we're taking a lot of that stuff that was going to Waypoint and bringing it in-house.
got it. And then do we have the right kind of sidewalk plowing equipment, or are we going to, I presume that Waypoint had their own equipment, and now we need to purchase the equipment to do the sidewalk plowing.
Yeah, so if you look at some of our capital expenses, we're retrofitting some of our current equipment. So our
Got it.
Ventrac that we purchased last year,
Got
we're
it.
adding some attachments. And then we're adding UTV out at the reservoir, or at Wild Wing Park,
Yeah.
which is going to be multifaceted. It can be used for park use, where we can,
And that's new.
that is new, but it's also not only, it's going to be used for just general park use, but then it also have a plow that we can use to do the plowing and all that
Yeah,
stuff.
great. And then the last comment that I'd like to make, I really appreciated the Graves study and the Graves presentation. Very well done. I think the setting up the STEP system is really important for a whole lot of reasons, including retention. And I also think it simplifies things quite a bit. I think the pay raises are reasonable that were recommended. That being said, how much of the Graves study and pay raise justification in the STEP system was made available to the public? I know we had a presentation on it, but just in effort of being transparent, is some of that publishable or to the public?
Could you be more specific, Bill?
Well, the Graves study itself, we had a presentation. We didn't actually get the study, correct?
The presentation was the study essentially.
Okay.
And everything else is very employee-specific, so I don't think we'd share
No,
that
yeah,
with
you
the-
wouldn't want to share, you wouldn't want to share that. And was the presentation itself available to the public?
It was.
Okay,
It was a work session.
Great. I just wanted to make sure that was the case. All right, thank you.
So I'll go back to Luke's question to us. So I would want to know, I mean, $1 million for anything is a lot, but it sounds like, and maybe we can kind of clarify that number, but with several positions coming from contract that we're already paying for, and again, I don't know what that break even is. Are we paying more as a contract than we would as an employee? Because we're not necessarily as a contract paying the taxes part of it, but you tend to pay more in order to, so that, because someone's paying the taxes. So I would say, I mean, what is I agree with Bill, right, on the timing of that too, but of the true new expense coming in, is that $1 million? Is that what we're talking about for the potential new hires? Or is
Yes.
it more break even? So
No, the net is 958,000.
the net is.
Yeah, but if I could just clarify a couple of points too. Like the revenue, these are conservative on the expense side as well. So when I budget for vacancies or I budget for new positions, I'm estimating they're going all in on the highest, most expensive plan that we have. Typically, that's not the case. We have very few employees in that instance. I'm also budgeting at the highest potential earnings.
Yep.
And a lot of times, depending on experience, we can hire at a lower rate. In addition, as Bill mentioned, there will probably be some vacancy savings because we're not going to bring all of these employees in on January 1st. However, I think it is the department's wish and desire to bring them on as soon as possible. So we can maybe look at hiring or staggering to reduce that number, but I think if we can hire all January 1st, these are all positions that departments really, really need, and that was conveyed to us during the budget meetings.
Yeah. So just to clarify again, with approval, all contract, let's start there, right? So all contract would convert 1-1, right? I mean, that's the ideal scenario. And then the positions to be filled, whether it's the irrigation or whatever that may be, you would like for them to be 1-1, but if we couldn't find an irrigation person until March or April, when we need to start water, right? It's not gonna be the end of the world. Obviously, key positions, officers, sergeants, things like that, we would want to get them if the need is there. Barring the right candidates, we would want to get them as soon as possible. But Luke, I mean, I'm with you. I think that number is a large number, knowing that it's all in. I mean, benefits on the higher end, right? All of that. It could be lower, and there could be some variance to the timing of it. I don't know that worst case, it'll be $1 million, but it could be half.
And I would just point out, I said it quickly, but I think it probably bears repeating at this point. We're really honed in on 2025 and then ultimately a 5-year window.
Yeah.
We are structurally balanced. So assuming low revenues and the highest personnel costs,
Yep.
we don't need to do cuts from there. So I do expect we will probably experience savings off of that 958 number. But assuming that is the actual number and that the revenues continue to be very conservative, we don't have a problem. So to pare back is to do so, it's not needed. Now, with that being said, I understand. I mean, Luke, you're seeing the same things we talk about very frequently. And so I do understand hesitation and, apprehension. But I think we talk about it and we budget in a way that we think those are sort of mitigated by anticipating a lower revenue than will probably be realized and a higher expenditure rate for those personnel than will probably be realized. But even under those, if the stars are aligned against Timnath, we would still be structurally balanced.
Yep. I want to make sure more, because I'm on record saying I have no problem paying the highest possible wage to get the right person in the right seat on the bus, right? So I think that is an absolute necessity, specifically in the police department. I mean, I think that department, I mean, you could probably get me to vote more on the 5 to 6 instead of the 4, but I'll take your word on it because I think that's a crucial part. But getting the right people and taking the time and finding the right pool, I mean, I'm 100% for that, even if it's on the higher end, as long as you feel comfortable that it's not going to put us to where we're having a conversation in 6 months of we need to eliminate someone. That's the last thing I would want.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't put you in that situation based on my numbers. It would take something really catastrophic.
Got it. Sounds good.
I'll comment that I noticed that the staff did delay several future positions by a year or two, so I appreciate those efforts. As I went through all these positions, I really agree that the need is justified, and also I think our future expansion is responsible. I do appreciate Luke's position. I think, he threw out, is there a way to do this at 750,000 as opposed to $1 million? I'm wondering if maybe we could ask you to, with respect to these 11 new positions, look at them and come up with a plan to reduce that budget item by about 10%. And maybe that can all be accomplished with a little bit of staggered hiring. Maybe it's all positions get funded. Luke kind of threw out 25%, but I don't know, where's the rest of council feel on that as a target?
20% off or 10% off call it $1.9 million, or whatever it may be. Yeah, I mean, it sounds like there's some room for that potentially to happen, even on the
Organically.
Yeah, organic and cautionary, but
Yeah, I don't think I'm particularly concerned about the numbers. If you look at what it averages out to per employee, it's about 110,000. That's including benefits, that's including all of that. In my experience of working for government, they often pay less than if you go into the private sector. And so I certainly think we need to make sure that we're competitive in our in our pay in order to get the most highly qualified individuals. And I do feel that some of those amounts may be lower just organically, like you mentioned, as far as just the time it takes to hire and things like that. And none of these positions stand out to me as something that I look at and say, oh yeah, we don't need that. So that would be my concern in looking to cut, whether it's cutting positions or cutting that amount is I feel like that could be detrimental to what our community members are expecting, at what kind of level of service they're expecting. And that would be my one concern about lowering some of those.
Yeah, I'm not in favor of cutting any of the positions. I do think, though, you've done a conservative projection, and I do think we will get organic savings there because, as I said, I think the chance of filling all 11 positions on January 1st is, I'd put $100 on it. That pretty. And I'd collect. The one other comment, Aaron, you weren't here when we had the Old Town session, but the issue of economic development position came up in the discussions, as well as it relates to the comprehensive plan. And there was discussion about making sure that we had economic development as a key piece of the comprehensive plan. And the suggestion was made by me that we include at least funds to get an expert in economic development to consult on the comprehensive plan so that we have the right expertise contributing to that. And the mayor also suggested that would it be possible for us to have essentially a position of economic development, not necessarily a director level position, but maybe at a manager level position associated with community development in the second half of the year. And I didn't see anything in the budget that addressed either of those two issues. And so I'd like, to hear what council's thoughts are on that.
I can tell you, I looked at some of the line items, and we have the $100,000 for the development incentives that's been budgeted the last 2 years, and we've only spent $7,000 and $8,000 on that. And I believe there's $25,000 budgeted in there for an economic development consultant. I was maybe going to ask the question so that's a combined total of 125. If we could maybe bump that combined total up to, say 150 to kind of accomplish what we're doing here. But my guess is, and Aaron, you can correct me if the 25 was kind of aimed at that objective.
Yeah, that's spot on, Mayor. And we're certainly, so if there's direction to make 2550, we can certainly do and absorb that.
My last comment is it sounds like we're all supportive of it, so I won't try to push it too much. I would just, maybe next year or throughout the year, Lisa, could you maybe just give us an update on how we're doing on the staffing and how close we are to our target forecast with that, if that's a possibility out of this budget? Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay. So what I'm hearing is no going back and reducing the budgeted amount, but to just track it throughout the year and give updates, knowing that we'll realize some savings. Okay.
I think so.
Okay.
Can I just clarify from the economic development standpoint, was that a nod to go from 25 in consulting to 50, or are we okay at 25?
Yeah, I'm hearing increasing it to 50.
Okay.
We'll do that too then. That's great. Okay. Any other personnel? Comments, questions? Maybe long-term. Could you, Jeremy, I'm sorry, could you use the mic? Thank you.
Sorry, I normally get told I'm too loud anyway. Maybe long-term, just something I would like to see. Rec Center's been mentioned. I know it's a big passion of all of us up here. What does that, and maybe that was in the Grave study, but what does that look like headcount-wise, right? I mean, I know it cost X to build it, but I mean, that's a pretty highly staffed on an ongoing basis. So not only the build cost, but what the potential is for staffing and, payroll, would that be full-time, benefits, all that type of stuff. So what that looks like when we go down that path.
Yep, we'll keep that in mind.
Yep. Okay, thank you. So we're going to change gears. We're going to talk about some of the operating budgets. I'm going to touch on some of the highlights. Our operating budget actually was highlighted in the bar graph. You noticed it didn't actually change a whole lot. So I'm going to try and touch on some of the things that are on our radar and then open it to discussion for you guys. Historically, we've talked quite a bit about events. Our 2025 plan and the way it is budgeted in the draft budget is very much a very similar thing to what we've done in this year in 2024. I'll buzz through these quick and then we can circle back. How about that? We will see an increase in parks maintenance. That comes with having Wild Wing Park coming online, but those are also included. So that just wanted to call out again some of the things that are standing out to us. So there will be some additional parks operating costs. That also includes some increased programming associated with that. Again, I think this is popular with the community. I think it's a great investment. I touched on this in my introductory comments. We do see a lot of action from a master planning standpoint. I think these help us in a community that's growing as quickly and changing as quickly as we are, to help us keep our eye on the ball and to make sure when we think about our future, we're utilizing our resources in the best way possible. We touched on this just briefly in the previous discussion, but economic development incentives are programmed, as the mayor mentioned, at $100,000. Per your direction, we'll increase the consulting from 25 to 50. And then, yeah, we've touched on this actually a couple of times, but we're seeing a decrease in some of those costs related to some of those consulting type things. By bringing those in-house, we are realizing some efficiencies. So that's a very high level touch on some of the things we're seeing within the operating budget for this year. In a lot of ways, a lot of it is actually very status quo. With that being said, there's a lot of things we can talk about. So I would actually like to open it up to the council. We're almost on pace if you don't have any questions, but as the mayor mentioned, we might have a little bit of time to flex past 5 o'clock. So if there's any of those topics you'd want to touch on, whether it's, for example, the events or the planning studies or any of those other items, that's a very high-level touch on those things, but we're happy to take any comments or questions you guys may have turned up in reviewing the draft budget.
I have a question on events, a couple things on that one. In the past, I think we've had 2 of the dump days or whatever you want to call it, which are awesome. And anybody that went through there, watched what they did this year in that freezing cold, pretty awesome. Was not willing to get out and help, but I was comfortable in my truck. What does it look like, and can we finagle some funds to go back to 2 instead of 1? Is that a possibility? I would like to see 2 of those if that's feasible. And then I guess it's a big question for me, but overall expense for fireworks, it seems like it's a pretty hefty. Whether we go 30 seconds less for 10 grand, I mean, I don't know what that is. I'm not a fireworks expert, but is there some funds that might be able to, I think I would never want to reduce the number of events. Just being at the event on Saturday and seeing that many people and, the smiles, I think the events team does an awesome job, but I would like to see 2 of those dump days. And then maybe even, expand that down the road to some more events, but what that looks like.
Could Callie or Courtney, could you give me a thumbs up? Is it 25 for the?
It's 30 for cleanup day,
Okay, I couldn't
right around
remember.
30. We didn't put into, Kelly, we only put, oh, got it, okay.
And Callie, is our only spot to do that the community park? At least maybe next year? Because I know it's all south focused, so I don't know if maybe in Wild Wing future years, if we've got the space to do that with the new park.
We could definitely look into that, and we could look into maybe the reservoir doing it
Okay.
if we were wanting to expand the footprint of where those are located.
Yeah, and I'd only throw that out, just like if we want to go to 2, maybe we can serve different parts of the community as well, so yeah.
Yeah. So you mentioned the fireworks. One of the comments I got at a recent NFR MPO meeting, I believe it was from the mayor of Johnstown. They did a 20-minute drone show for 4th of July that was extremely well received by the citizens there, and it cost $30,000. And we're spending, if I have the numbers right, I think $120,000 on our fireworks show. I'm not suggesting we eliminate fireworks, but if we could shrink the fireworks down and maybe do a drone show with a big finale and fireworks, you might end up, it would be worth looking into whether or not we could save some money, and the drone shows are pretty cool. So we might be able to find a little extra money there for some other things like a second dump event, or maybe even save money. So just a thought worth looking into.
I'll tell you, on events, I am very conflicted because when we look at town identity, events are something that we are just knocking it out of the park on, and I know that the feedback on it is really positive. It's also an area, having sat on council several years prior, that prior councils were quick to increase the budget. And when we're coming into a year or two of more flat revenue, I asked the question, is that a responsible use? Essentially $1 million out of our 21 million in expenses going to events. So I appreciate that we didn't increase it. I think that's financially responsible, but I'm conflicted. I do ask the question, like, if you take fireworks budget, down 20 grand, does that impact the quality of the show, or is no one gonna notice?
The ladies in the back could speak to this better. I think there is an opportunity to pare that back a little, and I mean, I think Jeremy said maybe 10 seconds. He's not far off. I think we could literally pare back 30 seconds of a 23 or 24 minute show. We could cut 30 to 60 seconds and realize some actual savings. So I think that is, if that's the council direction, I think we can certainly help make that happen.
So we did talk with our fireworks vendor about what would it look like if we were to scale back our show. And our professional advice here would be that we don't scale back necessarily the number of fireworks, but that we scale back, like eliminate a song. So we offer a unique aspect that we've got the pyro musical piece. So if we just shaved off an entire song, let's shave off 20K, then I don't think that the citizens would really notice too much of an impact. It'll still be a really cool show. It'll still have the pyro musical aspect. You'll still walk away with chills. It's still very patriotic, that type of thing, but it is scaled back. So our budget this year was 120. Because of the pricing that came in after, they were able to save us a little bit. So we are not going to we aren't billed the full 120, but still, I think we could scale back to 100 and not see too much of an impact.
Do you want to talk fireworks or?
I think that's a great idea. And I also do think it's worthwhile looking at a drone show, either as a complement and scaled back further, or as an alternative, because they can be pretty cool and they're a lot less expensive. It's just worth looking into. All right?
Yeah,
Thank
we
you.
can definitely look into that.
And one thing the mayor and I have talked about is our per capita spend per resident on special events. Callie, do you get the sense, and I've received this feedback before, like, oh, our fall festival is 20% severance people, and I know there's a bit of free marketing we get as the town and things like that. Is there any sense that, that some of these events we need to, maybe look into invitation to town residents in a sense so that we keep some of that, our per capita here spend on that? Or what's your sense? Because people always say the fall festival, I feel like there's a lot of Windsor residents here or Severance, and I know it's the same for other towns, right? Like their fall festival doesn't or their harvest festival doesn't track who's coming in. Do you get a sense that maybe that's a problem or something that concerns you?
I would say that of all of our events, 4th of July and Fall Festival, we definitely draw a wider region of people. Ice Cream Social, I'd like to say that it stays a lot more Timnath central, but that's not to say that we don't have, some people coming over from Windsor or things of that nature. But it seems as if it's more Timnath centralized, that and holiday. But definitely Fall Festival and 4th of July, we see more of a region-wide draw.
To that point, so say Ice Cream Social, right? And say 10 or 15% are not residents. What is our overspend for non-residents at that point? I mean, what are we to adding another 250 people getting ice cream? I mean, is it $5 a pop on average, roughly?
Yeah, it's not adding too much on, because no matter what, we're having to bring in the basis infrastructure for these events.
I'm just more thinking of, I mean, I really like Luke's point. If we're going to give something out, you got to show proof, right? Like if you're going to dump at the dump, you got to show proof of residency. So that way it's not, 10,000 people coming from everywhere to dump. I'm not opposed to doing something like that at the Ice Cream Social, but the headache of, oh, I forgot it, I got to go home. If the savings of only $500 or $1,000, I don't know that it's right. If we're shaving tens of thousands or even 5,000, I think it's worth it.
And I'm going to make an opposite point though, which is I attend the Harvest Fest in Windsor. Yeah. I attend stuff in Loveland. I attend stuff in Fort Collins. We are all better off when we can collaborate with surrounding 100%. Communities, and so. Yeah, some Windsor folks are getting a benefit that they're not paying property tax on, but our folks get the benefit of their events as well. Yeah.
No, I'm not disagreeing with you. I just want to know if we're ever at capacity, right? Like, I feel like some of the fall festival felt maybe less crowded than it was in previous years this year, and so I'm just saying that in terms of it. Like, no, I'm not saying we should do that, but if we ever get to that point where we're having to significantly increase our events budget because of the infrastructure, say, needed for all of the surrounding communities or way like that, I just want to keep an eye on that. Like, is that what's really increasing our cost, or is it fireworks? Right. Kind of look at it.
I mean, eventually, my goal, right, for those is you go to Harvest Fest, the amount of vendors and local businesses, because there's so many in Windsor that are there. Once we get to that point in Timnath to showcase those, then bring everyone, because then we're bringing revenue back to the community overall. So, I don't necessarily know that we need to.
No, I'm not suggesting we change anything. I just wanted an idea, because we get that feedback a lot sometimes for our events when they have to stand in line for face painting. Yes.
I have a question about, so the Fall Festival, in my opinion, recently has more of the summer-like weather than many of our summer events. And I know there's been many years where 4th of July and many of the movie nights have been rained out. Do we keep that data, and is there a way to know how many of those? And the only reason I ask is because if certain events have just had issues like that, maybe those are the events that we look at if we are wanting to cut some of the budget.
We do have that data. We've been talking about, do we need to maybe push even Fall Festival a week because it felt like 4th of July this weekend. It was toasty out there, but we do have all of that data if you would ever like to look at it. Of each year, we keep record of if there was a weather cancellation or a delay, and then what the attendance was.
I think that would be great to look at some point, only because I know there were 2 or 3 years in a row with 4th of July. And then I know I personally have been out at the movie nights where the movie nights have been canceled as well. And so I just think those would be one of the easy things to kind of go to.
I would say the 2025 budget has insurance, not for every event, but for those bigger ticket events, we do have them insured in case we have to call off.
So I've heard council would be supportive of maybe reducing the fireworks a little bit. I've heard some interest in bringing back second town cleanup day. What else do we need in terms of feedback here?
Those were the 2 I actually heard, and they may be a relatively even swap to drop one song and add a second cleanup day. If that's the council direction, I think we can probably make that happen.
And I agree with Luke. Exploring options of doing it at a different location if feasible, maybe at the reservoir or somewhere closer to the high school. Maybe the high school lets us use their parking lot or something like that. I don't know.
I think we could definitely do that. And the other takeaway was, I think Bill had a good suggestion in terms of looking at alternate 4th of July with the drones and things of that nature. Yep. So those are things we can certainly keep on our radar and look into.
Yeah, you have enough time to look at it.
Overall, you guys do an awesome job.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. With that, we still have other operational highlights. Are there other areas we need to spend a little time chatting about, or are we feeling pretty good? Our next topic, if you're looking at the agenda, takes us into our CIP. We're not quite on schedule, but pretty darn close. So I don't want to cut off the discussion if there's other things from an operations standpoint that we want to touch on.
You know, I did have a handful of line item things, but I'm happy to get with staff offline on those. They're kind of in the weeds.
Perfect. We can certainly do that. Is everybody okay if we move on to CIP then? Okay. Lisa, are you taking the first word? So Lisa's going to take the first word, and then we'll turn it over to the folks who are actually putting them forward, which would be mostly Justin and Tom and their staffs.
I'm just going to touch high level on capital purchases and replacement that you'll see in the CIP, and then turn it over for the larger expenditures on the capital projects. For 2025, we have 88,000 in new software requests. That's related to an asset management system, a GIS framework, and also employee evaluation software. Computer equipment includes some security upgrades as well as new PCs for the new FTEs that we discussed earlier. And then there's vehicles and other equipment new of 423,000, and then replacement. You'll see across we budget for replacement cycles based on the useful life, so it varies. In 2027, it's $1 million because snow plows are really expensive, and so that's why that's such a large year. Happy to go over any of those in detail, but like I said, I just wanted to give enough time on the capital projects as well. So.
I know it's down the road, but are we adding more snow plows? Is that what you're projecting?
No, not adding, replacing.
They have that short of a lifespan.
No, they have probably, what's the lifespan?
Isn't one or two of them, isn't one pretty new?
It's a 2014 snowplow would be, actually we're extending it a couple of years. So really that was targeted, that snowplow was targeted, it was a 2014. It was targeted for this year, but we talked to the vehicle maintenance, you get a couple of years out of it. After that, we are going to be spending more fixing it than replacing it. So.
Got it. Makes sense. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, if there's no other questions on that, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Justin and Tom.
All right. Yeah, I want to first of all thank Lisa for helping us out on this budget, with this software. I'll be doing this with Tom, and I also want to thank Kim and also Earl on helping out with this. And if you have difficult questions, they'll be my phone or friend. So, so what we'll do is we'll start out at the 30,000 foot level and explain how the CIP ties into the strategies that we have. Next slide, I'll go over to the strategic plans, goals, and strategies. So, as you know, the town has strategic goals and strategies. So the two ones for the capital plan are pretty much the deliver exceptional parks, facilities, and recreation programming. And I won't go through each of the items, they're up there. And then, of course, like Aaron said, is just the upgrade, the essential infrastructure, especially as the town grows. We want to make sure we're on top of it so we don't have issues later, especially with growth. So we want to be able to keep up with growth. Next slide. So after you have the goals and strategies, then those go into the different plans that we do. So if you remember, we just finished the transportation master plan that was adopted just in February of this year. So what we do is implement those. We take those recommendations from those plans, and when we do these studies, it's the communities involved. Like the transportation plan, we had a whole year there with different outreach. I think we came also to council, so we have good outreach already on this. We have a good idea of what facilities or capital improvements we need. And so what we did is we took all the near-term improvements and plugged them into the budget. So that's not only for next year, but also like we do, we plan out 5 years to make sure that we're going to be able to keep up with not only next year, but moving forward. Also, the master drainage plan was adopted in 2018. So there's a couple of projects that we want to do with that one, mainly on the downtown. Facilities master plan, we're still in progress. We did, I think it was a couple months ago, we came before you to kind of look at the different options on that. So we did use some of the information that we had from that plan, the plug-in, mainly the facilities assessments. So based on that plan, we could look at the age of the buildings, like 4,800 Goodman, and say, what does the HVAC need to be replaced, or what kind of improvement? So those are all plugged into it. And then the park recreation, open space, and trails master plan. I'll let Tom kind of go over that, especially when we talk about the parks projects. So I don't know if you want to mention anything now or just wait. Okay. Next slide. So one of the things we do want to look at as far as right now, the town's funding a lot of this infrastructure, like I said, $30 million this next year, and moving out, I think it's like average $20 million. So what we want to do is look strategically at all of our projects, assess them, what potential grants there could be for those, and come up with kind of a strategy. And I'm very lucky to have Kim. So Kim and her other experience, she helped out other towns, like for instance, Fort Collins, to help actually them, when they went through their capital projects, he helped assess that. Also with our general engineering on call, we'll have, actually there's grant specialists that also work for them. So we'll be able to kind of look and target. We want to be strategic. We don't want to just go for any fund, especially if we're going to, spend more money in the paperwork than the money we get for it. And then I think Kim made the point, is we want to be in it to win it. We don't want to just start submitting applications for stuff that we have no chance for. So we want to be really strategic. So we'll start that this year. So there may be a potential. I don't want to guarantee anything, but we'll try to look for some funding to help, with that. That would just, again, maybe could push some other projects forward or other operation needs and stuff. So we do want to look at that. We also want to coordinate with the North Front Range MPO and regional partners on this. So I know Bill's been a great help with me on this to kind of partner and collaborate with them. So actually on the next slide, I'll give you a perfect example. Next, yeah. So we did get a request from Weld County for a regional mobility program, and I'll have to read out the MMOF stands for Multimodal Transportation and Mitigations Options Fund. So this is a request. Basically, it would include a new bus, and then what it would do is it would provide free rides for disabled or seniors 60 and plus. And if you look at the map, it's the gray map of where they've done it already. They've already had a pilot program that they've been doing this for some of their towns. Timnath hasn't been involved in this, but it goes up to maybe Cheyenne or even North Denver. This could be medical appointments or something like that. That could be needed for the different individuals. So as far as costs, the grant total was $567,661. So basically, the town or all the other towns, that would be the grant portion that we would be bringing money in from the federal or wherever the grant would provide for that. So the town funds would be total over the 4 years would be $23,000. So for 2025, it would be about around $1,900, and then it kind of ramps up from there. So what I'd outlined for you is kind of some pros and cons. The pros would be provides free rides for disabled and seniors 60 and plus. It would be a collaboration with regional partners that would kind of we scratch their backs, and sometimes they come back and scratch our backs. So it's just something we're partner. We're not in there just for us, but we're with the whole region, because there's other cities too, not just Timnath. It would be provided by a lot of the small towns around here. It also, like I said, leverages town dollars with grant dollars. It would also provide a pilot to gauge really what kind of transit needs do we have for seniors and stuff, so we'd be able to actually see what kind of need is out there. The cons, I've tried to ask for riderships. It's hard to get that. We won't know. It could be limited. Who knows? And so that would be kind of the cost per ride could be pretty high. So that's kind of the cons. So I just wanted to get, the application is due, the draft is due October 25th. So I just wanted to get kind of council's thoughts on if that's something, it's a work session, we can't vote, but just kind of general direction if that's something we want to apply for.
Well, I'll make a comment. I'm very supportive of this. I think the fact that we don't really have any public transportation in Timnath, this would certainly help disabled individuals and seniors that need to get to doctor, dental appointments, other critical appointments. And yeah, the ridership is unknown, but the cost to the town here is pretty small, and obviously involves a pilot program to get started. So I'm definitely in favor of following through on this.
Thank you, Director Stone and Councilmember Jenkins, for all the work on the NFRPO. I think our increased engagement there recently has been a great thing. If this can help us show that we're willing to be collaborative in that group, I think it's great. And looking at the return on investment, it makes sense to me.
Yeah, I'll agree. I mean, I think there's several things that we could utilize transportation for. This is a huge piece. I think even down the road, looking for options for transportation or public transportation, even for youth, for programs that, going from Fort Collins, whether it be to, different nonprofits or services or, sports, things like that, down the road. So yeah, I'm also in huge support of this.
I agree. I would just say when we're looking at that, I don't know all the details, of course, but when it says for disabled or seniors, if we can make sure that any kind of vehicle is also appropriate for electric wheelchairs or motorized scooters, because often there are services that say they are for disabled or seniors that don't actually have the equipment for electric wheelchairs. So if we could look at that as well, please.
Yeah, I'll make sure I'll pass it on.
I'm with the rest of the council. I'm in support of it. I just think are we committed for all 4 years? If we apply for it, there's no backing out, right? I assume.
I think it's subject to reappropriation each year, and we could, look at it. But I think it does, we sent a commitment, and then also the other players, kind of budget based on that. So in a way, we're committed, but legally, I don't know, I guess we could ask the attorneys, but I don't know.
Yeah, that would be my only concern is, would there be funds later that, we go from the grant funds from $500,000 to nothing? I think I would just want to review it at that point.
Yeah.
One other related point, you brought up youth, and one of the things I'm interested in with regard to the MPO is the possibility of some future microtransit that would get particularly youth or people traveling to the Denver airport to get them from Timnath just across I-25 to the transportation center, which opens up transportation all across northern Colorado, Fort Collins, the airport, et cetera, because it's difficult here to get any kind of public transportation, whether it be Lyft or what have you, to pick somebody up in Timnath and take them over to the transportation center, and yet it's only, maybe a mile and a half, 2 miles from. So some kind of micro-transportation in the future would be really great to get us over to the transportation center.
All right, thank you. Thanks for the direction. Next slide. So that brings us into the actual roads and utilities part of the plan. So I think we also shared with you, I'm visual, so sometimes it's easier for me to kind of look at the map here. So what we want to do for a roadway intersection is prioritize finishing the parkway north of Harmony. That's, we built the middle section, so kind of focus in on that. So that's what also the transportation plan says. And there's a couple reasons for that. One is the landings SIA, that we get 50% reimbursement if we go ahead and build those sections out within the next few years. So we want to make sure we target that so we get that 50%. Also, it's just to minimize any gaps in throwaway transitions. So if you look at the program, that's kind of where we would be focusing on that. Let's see. The other thing is broadband. We would, continue to, fund that out. As you can see, the next couple of years are a little bit more expensive, but then we start to peter out after we get most of the community on board. The one thing we do want to have to look at that was brought up before is we have to start thinking about is the County Road 5 bridge, construction on that. So one of the things we do want to look at is the time that we want to make sure we're ahead of the curve as far as growth. We don't want to be too far ahead. So I do think, with Ladera and stuff, we do have some time. The need is not, pressing at that point. And also we would, make sure the PIF, the public improvement fee could build up so we'd be able to get reimbursed right away. So that way we'd be watching that. We do have money in there to go ahead and do the, this year we're currently already working at the different types of alternatives. And so once we get those, we have an idea of what alternative we have, we'll know a little bit better by the end of the year, alternative we're going to do, and then how much it's going to cost. So right now the programming is just mainly to do more of the design work on that part of it. A lot of these others are just placeholders for developments that we would have the kind of, especially up on Main Street, the tie into if those develop. One of the other ones is sidewalk. Multimodal would be Harmony. So again, if the development east of 3 Rebel happens, we'd be able to put the sidewalk in at that time. So a lot of these are also dependent on development action. Based on, the downtown, we do have some money. I think for downtown, about 150 grand. It could be different things. We'll see how that plays out, but we did want to put some money in because we do have to think about when we do, shift traffic over, that's going to change the character of down, Main Street. So we would want to have some money so we could kind of plan that ahead instead of just, we put the traffic over here now, what do we need to do? We want to be ahead of that and do, make it more of a multimodal type, situation that we have possibilities for safety and other improvements for the downtown. So I don't know if you have any specific questions on any of these, but that's kind of the high level of those.
Yeah, also with regard to Old Town and the changes that will address multimodal, make it safer, particularly once the parkway comes into play. I would think that we might be able to look at the Main Street program as well to see if they might have some funding that would be available to help us with that, in addition to the funds you already have identified.
Yeah, definitely. We would be coordinating also with, planning, especially with I think the committee, the downtown committee, and also some of the planning efforts.
Right.
And that'll be the big key, is to have some kind of a plan in place to get like Main Street funding. Because that's what they want, is usually, is in your comp plan, do you have a plan for it?
Exactly.
Yeah,
And are you spending money, town money on it? So some of the grants have sharing expenses between the town and the Main Street program, so.
Yep, definitely we have that on our radar moving forward.
Yeah.
Yep.
Great.
Any other questions? Okay, I guess we go to the next one. So on buildings and facilities, like I mentioned, a lot of these numbers, especially out in the outer years, are more for the maintenance type things. We did put in there design for, would be the site over here. We looked at the 3 options. We're kind of looked at outside of we'll let Tom talk about the rec center, but just looking at, that was one of the options that kind of made sense, especially because we don't know yet about the rec center. That's something we could look at. And again, this is next year, so if things change, the design could be something else, but at least we have some idea of, for the future with all the staffing, we want to make sure we're ahead of it. We do have room, as the consultant said, we do have potential to resituate things here. Seems like there's enough area, it just needs to be reprogrammed a little bit. So we do have a little bit of time, but we do want to go ahead and budget that. So, and then the next year. So that's probably the biggest one. The other one is security. So when I was actually working at Goodman, it's like I was worried about the security, and that was something on my radar, but unfortunately we had a theft before then. But definitely we want to up our games on the security, but we've worked with George in IT. He's been great, so we're already starting to do improvements there. Actually, we do have the new code system that we need to program in, but we do want to make sure we have security needs, and a lot of those change pretty quickly with technology. So I know this facility's been here 4 or 5 years, and we want to be consistent. We want to make sure whatever security we use for the other buildings is consistent across the board. So that's pretty much the funding we're looking at there. I don't know if you have any questions on those.
Yeah, I have one. With regard to the hut going in over there at Goodman, do we need to budget a little more for security to cover the hut?
Yeah, so maybe Earl could jump in, but I do know we're going to look at camera systems, and I think we were going to point, we'll have the fence that you approved, but also security, and a lot of it's AI now, so if somebody's messing around at a certain time, or actually with the hut, it's like really nobody should be messing there.
Exactly.
So even if we're like in our offices or it's night, we would be notified that somebody's there and you need to go check on it. But usually the hut's pretty secure in itself. They can't, until they get into the hut. But still, we do want to have eyes and ears on that. So that is part of the security is
okay.
Keep
It's
eyes
just
and ears
it's
on
a
it.
really critical piece
yeah.
of infrastructure that once people are hooked up to it, I mean, it could be health and safety issues.
Definitely.
Depending on that internet connection. So
The 500,000 that's this building here, correct?
Yeah, the expansion, the wing. I
So
believe,
that's not just design, that's design and build?
No, that's just the design. If you look out the future years is where I think we put the money in for the construction. Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay. So tell me all what we get for 500,000.
Yeah. I'll let the
That seems
facilities expert.
excessive.
And when you answer that, if I could add on as well, if you could answer why, like that's a big time frame in between, and things can change in between. So my question to add on to that would be if you could explain why we would want to do that in 25 and then not do anything with that info for 5+ years.
Certainly. What we would do is we would retain the services of an architect, and that would get us a full design of the addition. And so if you recall from the master plan presentation, we would be looking at a one-story addition on the south side of this building. So that 500,000 gets us the full design for that and bid documents ready to bid that. We put the future year dollars out there because we didn't know exactly when it would be needed. We anticipate it being needed sooner, but we're tapping the brakes slightly, waiting on the outcome of the recreation center situation. So we will finalize the facilities master plan here within the next few months once we gain some information from Tom's efforts. Once that's finalized, then we'll have a better idea of what the actual timeline is. So we want to get started with the design because that does take a long time. And then by the time the next budget cycle rolls around, we're talking about 2026 budget, we'll have a real good idea of when that timing would be.
Okay. I mean, I'm not comfortable with that number. I'm not an expert by any means, but for somebody to design a one-story expansion for $500,000, maybe I can be explained to be offline, but that just seems like a very large dollar amount for somebody to put up drawings for somebody else to then spend almost $6 million to build. But I'm an insurance guy, so just my 2 cents.
My suggestion on this is we finalize all of our plans before putting dollars forward with the plans that are coming. That would be my suggestion. Is it feels like we need to have the entire picture, the entire strategy before putting dollars towards it, but that would be my suggestion.
Luke, I think that's an excellent point, and I should have mentioned that. It's not our intent to go out with an RFP within the next few months. We do intend to, have all of these studies completed and have clear direction before we take that next step.
And to follow up with what Jeremy was saying, so just out of curiosity, how long does it take somebody to create those plans? Because $500,000 to me is, 3 people full-time for a year, which doesn't quite add up based on that. So I'm just kind of curious.
Well, keep in mind it is just a budget number. Hopefully it'll come in much below that, but I would anticipate the design on that taking 6 to 9 months probably. The other thing to consider is all the permitting process and all of that. So the timeline gets stretched out quite a bit when you get into these projects.
Is the permitting and all that figured into the 500 or figured into the 5.7?
It could be either, but it's most likely going to be in the 5.7 when we go to the construction phase.
Lisa, how long till we pay off this building?
2030 is our last payment on this building.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I think a lot of the facility-specific stuff, we have to finish that study and get a direction. I know I may be overly ambitious in this, and I know it's in a different category, in the rec category, but I would like to see the rec center on our next 5-year plan, not as a future thing. And I understand that by doing that, we put a big expense up there without a way to pay for it. But I think that's also the point when we start considering how to pay for things and kind of demonstrating that this can't happen unless we have a strategy to pay for it. So yeah, I share these concerns that the 500,000 did strike me. I can go either way. I mean, we can always amend this budget if we go through the facilities master plan and we choose a path, and part of that path is design a remodel here. So at least from the budgeting standpoint, is it better to put a number in there and when you don't know what's going on, or?
It's better to put a number in, that way we can engage and act appropriately when we need to, rather than coming back and asking for approval and it delays the timing of everything.
And I think it's a good reminder to all of us that we will also have to approve that when the time comes as well. So if the details of it don't add up, we have that option at that time.
Yeah, and to your point, Lisa, I think the fact of the matter is you're not going to spend that $500,000 unless council at some future point approves it. And we might approve it, we might not. So it's good to have it in the budget, and if we don't need it, it could be used for something else. So.
Okay. Sounds like we're good with.
All right, any other questions on the facilities? All right, go to the next one. So stormwater, mainly it's per the stormwater plan, there is some improvements for downtown, and that's part of the downtown discussion too. So the design was based on existing, like a lot of houses downtown. So if we go ahead and do more, asphalt parking and stuff like that, we want to relook at that. Also, the other thing is if we don't, then the developer is going to have to do that on site with storage. So that's not efficient. So it was in the master plan to look at downtown. So we want to do that. So that's what the money is for the downtown stormwater improvements plan. The other one is just stormwater regional improvements. That is, we want to make sure if we do have a situation like with stormwater issues that we need to address right away, we want to be able to have money to go ahead and address that and not have, because with flooding and stuff, timing is critical. So we would like to, and this has been in the past budgets too that we have, and it's been consistent. So we're just carrying over what past practice is on that. So I don't know if you have any questions on those two.
So we did have a stormwater impact fee that we were collecting and is in a fund, and it's at $1.5 million or something. And we're no longer collecting that. We obviously have these needs. Looks like these needs are kind of below where the fund was already sitting, and that's why we eliminated that impact fee. Is that all consistent?
That is true. And then also, I don't think the downtown stormwater would be eligible for impact fees because that's not where the growth is happening. And so it definitely has to have a correlation with development and growth.
Okay. And then we also talked about maybe being able to use the existing impact fee that was collected to assist with the County Road 5.
That's right. I have that reserved for that one that needs to be pulled up.
Okay.
I did have a question about the stormwater master plan that was done in 2018, so quite a while ago. When is there a plan to update that stormwater plan?
Yes, we do, and that was one we pushed out a little bit, but we do have it on the radar. I don't know, do you remember which year we put that to? Was it like 2011, I think? But we do need to look at that and update it, so that is, I think, there.
In the 5-year projection, there are funds set aside for...
In the master, I think the master planning operations,
great.
there is, yep.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. And the next one, I think it's to Tom, so, all right.
So basically, the key takeaway is we need to get this post-master plan done and the rec center feasibility study so we can move forward. And the intent to paralyze a lot of our projects, but we want to make sure we're well thought out and get community input when we're doing all these things. So if you want to look, we just go quickly down the line here. So the Timnath Recreation Center, that $50,000 would be to hire a consultant to, if you guys decide to take it to the next level and put it on to take it to a vote. This $50,000 would be to hire a consultant to get us to that point. So we moved the future, the $74.5 million. That's based off of an 80,000 square foot rec center, which is similar to what Windsor has. So just to kind of throw out where that number came from. And that includes a 4% escalator that if we were to build it in 2027, that's roughly a cost. But we need to get the feedback from the residents to see what they want, so we can plan all those pieces to see exactly the size of the rec center before we can gauge square footage and all that stuff, so. The next thing is the future 80-acre community park. That's been a carryover for a while now, but KM Properties up north, that's slated to be that. We'll see if there's a big push to get that done through the master plan process. It's up off of Colorado Boulevard. It's actually on the Weld County side, past Wild Wing Park. Timnath Ranch Park, we moved that to future because that's either going to be a park or a rec center. This is one of the spots that is in consideration for the rec center. So that's going to gauge if it doesn't become a rec center, then we definitely are still on the hook to make that a park. So we push that out till we know more information. Wild Wing Park, in 2027, we have $160,000 to design phase 2, which we left off the tennis courts. We can do a lot more playground aspects to it, the community garden, and then there's also the strip closer to Colorado Boulevard on the east end of the soccer that would need to be developed. So these are based off of round numbers from what the first phase costs to come up with that $4 million for that. So Timnath Reservoir Trail and Park, that $160,000 is we're going to update the master plan and make sure we're on target. One of the questions in the Prost survey was specifically asking about amenities. So from this, we'll come up with some more renderings, and then we'll also design the next phase, and then we'll do that again in 2027. Maybe not an update, but more of a design for the next phases from there. So Heritage Park, I moved to future. We currently don't even actually own that land at this point. It's part of development. So until we know more, we're going to push that out. Riverbend Park, same thing. Once we got to figure out what we're going to do with the County Road 5 bridge, because that's going to overlap some of that property. So open space acquisition, that's one of the things that we're looking at through this master plan on coming up with a plan, because not only is it not just purchasing land, it's maintaining it, taking care of it. So that's what we're going to hopefully do within this master plan. The T-Rock Trail, I just pushed that out to future. We could build, it's actually supposed to be built by the developer, and that's basically going from Harmony Road that'll take us eventually over to the reservoir. There's 2 sections of it. One is going to be built by Timnath Landings, and the other one is by the McMorris property. And either one of them are breaking ground, so I didn't want to build the T-Rock section only brings it to the McMorris property, so we would build a trail to nowhere. So we push that off till we know more. Water rights and non-pot, the 250 will help us finish off the non-potable system that we're going to redesign and have an above-ground system. It makes more sense, a lot easier to use. And now that we've had this temporary system going, we've actually learned a lot. The system in place works and it's pretty solid, but trying to find a long-term solution, making sure. So that's one of the things we're getting done this year. The general trail improvements is 125. It doesn't have anything specifically, but it's if we get a trail connection opportunity, we'll have some funds to do. And these are small trail sections. The Poudre River Trail connection. So as you see, this is that last section that goes from that Larimer County is intending to build. It's a 1-mile section. We have a little portion of that we're still the town's still responsible for, but it's more on. It makes more sense for the county to build it. In addition to that, there's a wayfinding signs that we're going to be putting in. That's a part of a three community grant. So that's there to fund those projects once they have. And then the last thing is the general park development. Typically it's $50,000. We have 2 projects in particular. So we did design a couple years back. We did design to redo the planters downtown, and it never got funded. So this is going to fund the planters. So we have a design that this will actually be to fund the actual work. So, and then there's another $10,000 when they built this system. The irrigation control board is different than every other irrigation system that we run. So we're going to make this one be the same irrigation system as the rest. So And then just so you know, we are going to carry over just a couple projects. So Wild Wing is expected to go into next year. We're going to run out of water in order to irrigate correctly. So a lot of the landscaping for the Wild Wing Park will go in next year. Timnath Community Park, we have a shelter going in. And right now it's slated to be delivered in December. So we're probably going to have to carry that over just to make sure we get the punch list and done. The PROS master plan got delayed when we added the rec center feasibility study. So hopefully we'll have that January, February timeframe. So that'll carry over. And then also the non-pot system, which is already in here. So do you guys have any questions for Parks and Rec CIP?
So I just want to make a quick comment first. And Tom, this is not on you. I want to make this very clear. But I had asked staff many, many, many times about the Pooter Trail and was always told that Timnath's portion was done. So I was a little surprised to see this on here. I know you and I chatted the other night, and I understand that the county will be responsible for that portion of it, but I just want to apologize to all the community members that I have constantly been telling that our portion is done, because apparently it's not quite done.
We could have done it on our own, but it would have just got us a little bit further to
Yeah,
nowhere.
I very much understand that, but I would have told people that rather than saying, "Oh no, we've done all of our parts." So I just want to throw that out there. And like I said, I'm not putting that on you. And then the other question I have is, I feel like we're at a point maybe where it might make sense to possibly put the rec center at like 2028, 2029 or something. I know obviously we're doing the survey, we're collecting all of that information, but kind of goes back to what was said earlier about once it's on there, it's then easier to talk to community members about, if you really want this, how are we going to fund it if it's really something we want done within that next 5 years. So that's just kind of something for council to think about.
My question was on the non-pot. So is the 500,000 the future? Is that for the future parks that you're looking at that for?
Potentially that, or if there's just non-pot in general, making sure that we can fund. But yes, typically that's for future parks.
So do you think we should add non-pot funding in this for fiscal year 26 through 29? Like just having a placeholder for that?
I don't really have anything specific at this point to put it towards. So I guess I don't have a good answer for you on that one.
Okay. Yeah, I just want to throw that out there, kind of like the strategy of putting things out on the budget so we know about them. I'd rather have that planning available to us for future years. You know, maybe to this point, so with Wild Wing, can you explain to me what happened, like when you said there wasn't enough non-pot to finish the landscaping?
It's just the irrigation turns off.
Okay.
Like
okay, so our timing was off, not the water.
Right, so it was a timing issue when we started the project. We've been pushing it forward, and there'll be some landscaping, but I mean, we have to irrigate it quite a bit. And it's just, I mean, we haven't done any landscaping right now, and it is October's tomorrow.
Yeah, understood. I would push as council that we just put some non-pot rights in there. I know we may not use it. It's just, I think if we're going to plan for future parks, we should also plan for future water for that. So I would encourage us to think about that.
I agree with that.
But we got to make sure that wherever we get it, we know what park it's going to. So we have to actually have those identified as well. So.
Agreed. I just want to put it on there because it's critical in my opinion. So I'm just pitching my plug on it.
The caveat to your point though is if we don't, it's going to come to us and it's going to be a large item that we're going to have to approve that wasn't in the budget at some point, right? Yeah. Versus setting aside $100,000 a year over the next 5 years and we have that same dollar amount. Yeah. You know, just something like that. I mean, I agree with that. It's on there. We're going to make it a priority if you need it in order to get it done.
Okay.
So I've got two things. One, thank you for putting the funds in for the planners in Old Town. I know the folks down there have been promised that for a long time and have felt ignored, so it's nice to know that you're not ignoring them, and it'll get done this next year. So that's terrific. The second thing, it's really a question about the 5-year plan. So we have these surveys, and there's a lot that we can't really lock in until we get data back from the survey. So I'm obviously the budget costs for 2025 seem pretty clear to everyone. It's the out years that are likely to could change considerably. So my question is really to Aaron, next year, and Lisa, next year, once we get this information back and we come up with a plan, is it possible for us to revise our 5-year plan to include items that aren't in the approved 5-year plan that we approve in December? Rather than, I'm not really comfortable throwing big ticket items and capital improvement items in a budget until we get the survey data back and we know what our citizens want. And then, you know, to everybody's point, we got to figure out how to pay for it, and that will be another decision point on the part of the citizens and council. Could we do that modification to the 5-year plan next year?
So I think, in a way, Bill, you sort of answered your own question, because we'll do this again with you next year.
No,
So,
I mean earlier in the year.
I don't think we'll need to do a budget amendment because we won't have anything happening in 2025. When you nailed it earlier when you said our 2025 is pretty well dialed in. That's
Right.
exactly right. That's what
Yeah.
we're talking about is 2025. So when we plan the 26 and future year budgets, we'll be amending those. So we will have a completed Parks and Rec master plan. We will have a dialed in feasibility study. So
And we'll have a dialogue with regard to funding.
that's correct.
Yeah,
And
okay, all right.
So
I
it sort of
don't-
remedies itself in a sense. We're not going to break ground in 25. We'll have a conversation about 26 a year from now.
There's some timing, though, just so you know that whenever, so at least for the rec center, whenever we get this on the ballot, that funding is not going to be available until we get the results of that, if that's something you guys decide to do. And, you know, looking at the election cycles,
Yeah.
that may be November.
Yeah. So, I mean, to my point is, I don't think we need to put ticket items in projection in this 5-year until we have the data back, because, yeah. So that was my only point. Thanks.
Okay. That actually takes us through the CIP. So we're at a point now, we're opening questions to anything we've talked about. It's sort of a last call of questions.
Yeah, let me real quick on the CIP. It was a more minor category. It was IT related, actually 2 of them. Public safety flock cameras, 12,350. The flock cameras seem really valuable. I know they tie us into a regional network. Chief, why are we only doing this for 12,000? Yeah, I was just saying, if your professional opinion is that's all that's warranted now, great, I support it. If your professional opinion was I didn't want to ask for too much and I thought I'd try to get a little, if there is more of a need, I'd support spending on those.
Yeah, I agree with your statement. Like, because you put it out for the next 5 years, is there a need to put more out quicker? Is there a benefit to us?
Then my second one was probably IT related. but I know the systems that we use to stream council meetings are a little outdated and kind of thrown together to make COVID work. Is that something that makes sense to look at upgrading, or are we fine where we're at?
I think we can look at that, and I'll have to double check with George. I think it is included in the upgrade meeting spaces for video conferencing. I'll double check, because I know he was working on that already.
And I looked at those line items. It didn't initially feel to me like it was in there, but
Okay,
maybe
I'll
the
confirm.
description was
Okay.
just not exact.
I will tell you, George has made some modifications, so we've had a frustrating little time for the last month or so. I think the process is actually finally getting dialed in, so we may not actually need expenditures. I think we've gotten to a much better place, but we'll talk to George to make sure he feels comfortable from that standpoint.
Right, yeah, just from a, transparency and accessibility perspective, I think it's important that people can both watch it live and review it after the fact. I do think there are people that don't come here knowing that they can watch it live, and when we fail that expectation, it hurts us.
Yeah, I certainly agree. We'll make sure that we're at that place. Again, I think we've had to make some changes sort of behind the scenes to what we have, but I feel like we're actually in a pretty good direction, but we'll talk to George and make sure that's buttoned down.
Okay.
My last comment was just on cash flow projections that are on page 9. We go from 20 to 10 to 14 to 8 to 16. And I know we talked about the big ticket items in this process, and I know there's a lot to that. I'm just wondering if in future years, if we could smooth our cash flow so that we don't go with our 5-year plan. It would just only be a suggestion. Like, can we, all 4 of those years roughly equal 12 million. So if we could just make me feel more comfortable, if we could just smooth out and it wouldn't be down to 8, then 16. So just a thought.
Yeah, I think I can look at that. I will say that the biggest variable on there is the building permit expenses, because that correlates with the timing. And so that's why it does fluctuate in some years. But yeah, we can look at that overall and see what we can do.
All right, last chance. So this work session's online. The materials from this are online. Looks like you're heading right in, but sorry.
Yeah, I mean, that takes us to our last little bits here. Just a couple closing comments, and what I would say is I think this budget shows a town that's growing, but it's also growing up. So I think what we're doing is continuing our efforts as a staff to professionalize this organization. Things that happen within a town with 500 residents are different than what happened at 5,000 residents versus 10,000 and now 12,000 residents. And so I think for those of us on the staff, this is an exciting time. We're, to some extent, whenever you're in a job, you're writing the next chapter, but it's different when you're building a Parks and Rec department literally from the ground up. So it's an exciting time for us. What I think is also worth commenting on is that while we talk internally about there being a flattened revenue and sort of a leaner year, we're making things work, and that our staff is dedicated to being responsive but also responsible to our citizens. And I think that's exactly what this budget does. I think we're appreciative as you folks guide us as a council. I think you have, through your comments and questions today, shown a diligence to being effective and prudent with the resources that we have. I hope that that has come through in the way that we have prepared this budget, taking multiple passes, sharpening the pencil, and really looking and digging in on ways to be more effective, more efficient. And so I think, I think it's a budget that you guys as a council can really be proud of, having your fingerprints on it with your input today that's so valuable to us. But also the way you speak to and address the budget really sets the tone for us to be prudent and just always looking for ways to do things better. So thank you for that. as far as our wrap-up, so obviously last day of September here, we're doing our work session. We will put all those things public. We will keep it open for basically most of the month of October in terms of allowing for public comment. We'll make sure that you folks as a council see any and all comments that come in. As mentioned, and I don't have that date right in front of me, but that first meeting of November will be that first reading, with it just being the one meeting. And then first meeting of December for final adoption. We do have room to make any changes in that window. So if anything comes from the public comment or from you guys as a council, I would tell you though, based on your feedback today and the changes, Lisa's been keeping a running tally here, we will make those changes as recommended. The budget's going to be pretty well dialed in unless we hear any other feedback from the public that moves the needle for you all. So we thank you for your time and efforts today. Thank you to Lisa especially and the rest of the staff. I think that takes it. Yeah, we don't need that one. That was kind of just it. So unless there's any other last comments or questions, I think that concludes the staff portion for us.
Yeah, I have just two comments. One, thank you for, this was easy to read and get through, very clear. So I really appreciate that. And secondly, I really appreciate the fact that the full budget was made available to the public prior to this meeting, unlike last year when I was sitting in the audience taking photos of the slides to try to figure things out. So I think that's important, and I have already gotten feedback from some citizens about the budget, and that's because it's been a transparent process. So I thank you for that.
Other comments?
Yeah, I mean, I'd just, on the other side, echo, my appreciation for what you guys have done. I think it's just hearing Tom stand up for, no, I need that position, right? It's well thought out. Everyone cares about their department. They don't just come to work to come to work. Chief had every opportunity to spend more money and is doing the right thing. Just that goes volumes. It really does. It's you guys are doing the right thing for the right reasons, and it's not just because it's your department. It's meaningful, within budget, and that goes a long way. So, kudos.
Yeah, I will echo that. Thank you, everyone, very much for all the work that went into this. It's clearly very well thought out. It's clearly in line with the greater strategic vision. This year in 2024 and next year in 2025, we really are seeing a lot of things that have been in the works for a long time finally come to fruition. Whether it's broadband, whether it's the parkway, whether it's recreation coming online. We have almost completely finished the transition from full-time contract positions to bringing them in-house. Just fantastic work. Thank you, everyone, for where you're at. I went through this and I looked for opportunities to criticize the line items, and things really are well thought out. And it's not extravagant. I think everything you're asking for makes sense. So thank you for that. I wonder, we have a council meeting on October 22nd. I don't know how council would feel, how staff would feel about either a brief agenda item on that council meeting or maybe a short work session prior to it, just to circle back after we've all had a chance to chew on this and receive public comment, just to see if there's any last minute adjustments before we put it up for finalization. And of course, I'll communicate with staff directly, but is there any appetite to do that, or?
Lisa's telling me she will be out, but what I would suggest is, why don't we keep an eye on what feedback we receive, and we can sort of play it by ear, but we could certainly do that. And I think if we're seeing our historic level of input, probably a quick agenda item would suffice. If the floodgates open and Timnath as residents are really locked in for this year, we could certainly exercise the work session option, but we could certainly plan for a quick touch base based on the comments we're seeing.
Okay, and maybe we can evaluate here in 2 weeks to what makes most sense there, but just knowing that people are open to it if needed, I think is a good thing. All right, anything else? Very good. Well, I will see those who are interested for the council chat this evening at 6 at Beer Works, and we will see everybody else here next Tuesday, the 8th, for our regular council meeting. We will be adjourned.